Okay, so can I just say that when we get to this opening scene of this week's chapter in the anime, I'm hoping that once the animators get to this part, they actually end up taking some strong liberties with it. Because, alright, the chapter opens up pretty much where the last one left off, with Rufus finding Yuno's dying body in the wreckage of the Golden Dawn headquarters, right? And we see, just like how we saw in the end of the last chapter, Belle huddled over Yuno's body, crying her eyes out, basically begging for him to survive in some way. Now, though, even though we got the same scene in the last chapter, unlike the last chapter, what we end up seeing is the fact that Belle is actually starting to slowly break apart, starting with her wings, going down to her back and the rest of her body. Now we only really see her wings, but you can assume that as her wings start to degrade, so will the rest of her body once the wings fully disappear. And this is basically just to indicate the fact that Yuno is actually dying right in front of her, because Yuno was her only connection to the human world, and with him dying, she will slowly start to fade away as well. And this is actually a really emotional and heartbreaking scene to watch. And that's why I'm hoping that when the animators get to this part in the anime, they can actually really extend the scene and max it out to 11 when they come to displaying the sadness of it. Throw in some sad music, throw in some flashbacks of Yuno and Belle's time together as they slowly grew closer. Really make us think, even us manga readers who know that Yuno ends up surviving this scene, really make us think that this actually might be the death of Yuno. Now, putting my hopes for the sadness of the scene in the anime aside, one thing I really liked about this part of the chapter is the fact that it kind of shows us exactly what happens to one of the spirits when the person they're contracted to ends up dying. Because I've always wondered that, and we've never actually seen that happen so far in the series. We've had 3 people, or technically 4 people, who have been contracted to 3 of the 4 spirits, and we have not, at to this point, seen what would happen when one of the characters end up dying. Now, when it comes to Salamander, who's the only indication or the only example of what happens to one of the 4 spirits when we kind of get a death of their character, when it comes to Salamander, we didn't actually see what ended up happening to him. We basically saw that the elf version of Fauna was expelled from human Fauna's body, and the Salamander just disappeared. We didn't see his death. We didn't see him disappearing like the way Belle did in this chapter. He just up and vanished. And the next time we saw him was when he was summoned back to the Earth by Fugoyan, when the 2 of them end up being contracted. But this chapter actually gives us a clear indication of what will happen to one of the characters or one of the spirits when their contracted character ends up dying. And that is that they will completely end up breaking apart and then vanishing from the human world, with the person that they're contracted to, their only connection to the human world, being dead. And what's even more interesting about finding out this fact is that this basically indicates exactly how Tabata's planning on showing the deaths or displaying the fact that a character who's contracted to one of the spirits is dying. And that is basically in the future when we actually see one of the characters who are contracted to one of the 4 spirits die, instead of the grimoire fading away or burning away, like how when Julius was dying, his grimoire burned away in front of our eyes to basically indicate the fact that he was dying. Instead of something like that happening with one of these characters who are contracted to one of the 4 great spirits, instead of showing us their grimoire basically burning away, what's going to end up happening to one of these characters who are contracted to one of the spirits is that it's just basically Tabata's going to display the spirit slowly breaking apart in front of them to indicate their death. And if I'm actually right about the fact that this was actually Tabata foreshadowing that this will be the indicator to show off that when a character who's contracted to one of the 4 great spirits is dying, instead of their grimoire basically fading away or burning away like any other character, then I have the sneaking suspicion that the reason why he put this scene in this arc is because of the fact that we're going to end up losing Lord Pachika by the end of it. And that's actually a very sad thought to think of, because of the fact that we've barely been introduced to her character. We don't really know much about her. Up to this point, we haven't really seen much of her at all in this arc. And I've actually was looking forward to possibly seeing her survive this entire thing and end up seeing her be an ally in later parts of the series. But this actually is about a foreshadowing the fact that someone's going to end up dying who's contracted to one of the great spirits. Then she would be the likely choice. Anyway, getting back to the rest of the chapter, like I said, we see Belle breaking apart while crying over Yuno's dying body. We get a scene where Rufus basically screams out something to Yuno, and I can't wait to see the official translated version of what he said, because what he said in the fan translated one doesn't really make any sense. Because what he's screaming to Yuno in this chapter in the fan translated one is something along the lines of, "From now on, you're going to." And in the context of the scene where he, as far as he's aware, Yuno is probably already dead in front of him, him yelling that out to Yuno, like saying something like, "From now on, you're going to become the king," or something like that, that doesn't make any sense. So I can't wait to see exactly what he was actually saying in the official translated version. But anyway, while the two of them are basically crying out over Yuno, we see this light start to glow. And this light is basically the tree of Yggdrasil, William's strongest healing magic activating. And it basically blooms and heals all the members of the Golden Dawn who were only on the verge of death, not officially dead just yet. Now, even though in the last review I predicted that actually would be Mimosa who showed up and healed everyone, I'm glad that at least William was able to use his healing spell in order to basically save everyone who was on the verge of death. But my biggest question from that scene is, when the hell did William have the chance to activate that spell? Especially when you take into the fact that he was fighting against Zeno the entire time, and the last time we actually saw William was him being knocked out and captured by Zeno. So I'm really trying to figure out exactly when he would activate that spell. And if I had to guess, I'd say the only two possible times when he could have activated it were either before William showed up in order to fight against Zeno, or when Zeno was taking William away after he had defeated Yuno. And you know what, speaking of the people that he was actually able to save, in my last review, including Yuno, I only selected 7 characters who I thought would end up surviving this attack by the Dark Triad. But instead, William's actually able to save at least half of members of the Golden Dawn. Now, we'll have to wait till the official translated version comes out to confirm that it actually was half. But as of right now, as far as we can tell, at least half of the members did end up surviving. Unfortunately though, 2 of the characters that I predicted would end up surviving this entire thing in my last review did not make it out. And those 2 characters ended up being Hammond and Siren. Yeah, unfortunately those 2 characters end up dying. And yet, fucking Alcdora, of all characters, ended up making it out alive. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Alcdora is a fine enough character. I'm sure he has a fan base out there somewhere. But if I had to choose a character out of the 7 fucking characters I mentioned in my last review to survive, Alcdora would not have been one of the characters. He would have been the one character I would have said, keep him dead. I'm sorry, I don't care enough for Alcdora to have him be the one to survive over Hammond and Siren. And we barely know anything about Hammond and Siren. We got more screen time of Alcdora than either of those 2 characters. But I still would have chose either one of them to survive over Alcdora. But yeah, anyway, only about half the members of the Golden Dawn end up surviving. And when Yuno ends up finding out that half the members of his squad end up dying, and keep in mind, this is the last scene we actually see of Yuno in the chapter, when he finds out that half of them died, he cries out at the top of his lungs in agony over their deaths. And this is actually just another scene that the bot drills in there to basically show us that over the plus the half-year time skip, over the little over 2 years time that Yuno's been a member of the Golden Dawn, he actually has grown close enough to these people that the fact that he wasn't able to save them would greatly upset him, to the point that he would cry out in agony over their deaths, like the way he does at this part of the chapter. And you know what, this is actually a great scene of character growth for Yuno, because not only does it show us that he actually did obviously care about these members of the Golden Dawn that he wasn't able to save, but we know that now the fact that he actually is going to blame himself for not being strong enough to save them is going to be a great indicator or a great motivator for him to actually gain enough strength to actually fight off against the Dark Triad later on in an arc. And that's a good thing, because Yuno desperately needs his power boost so he can fight off against the Dark Triad, because of the fact that out of everyone in this arc, besides maybe the Princess of the Heart Kingdom because of the fact that she has a curse on her, out of every other character that we know is going to be participating in this arc, Yuno is the one who should the most be going up against one of the Dark Triad members, because of the fact that not only did they kill off and defeat a lot of members of his new family and friends from the Golden Dawn, they are also the ones responsible for killing off his original birth family as well. Even though he had no idea about that before, now that he is aware of the fact that they were the ones who killed off his family, like we saw in the flashback or the scene in the last chapter, where he had a quick flashback to seeing the fact that his family was killed off by Zeno and the other members of the Dark Triad, he should be the one out of everyone wanting to fight against them. And if he's at a power level where he's not even remotely a threat to them, then it's not going to be a fight at all. So Yuno has to desperately get some kind of power boost that will put him at a level to where he can stand toe to toe against at least one member of the Dark Triad. Anyway, after we're done checking in with Yuno and the other members of Golden Dawn, seeing who survived and whatnot, we get this scene where we check in with Vanica, the one member of the Dark Triad who I wasn't sure was a guy or a girl. In this chapter, we actually get the official confirmation that she is a girl. We're checking in with her, and she has 2 Dark Apostles with her, seemingly, and it looks like that they're on the border of the Heart Kingdom, or they're outside of the Heart Kingdom looking into it, and it seems like they're possibly going to end up attacking. And one thing that's kind of, the reason why I kind of thought that maybe Lord Patika might end up dying within this arc is because of the fact that Vanica mentions that she's hoping Lord Patika is still alive and that she's doing well, because it will be extremely boring if she died from a curse instead of by her hands. Now, this is obviously kind of foreshadowing the fact that, like I said, that Lord Patika might end up dying by the end of this arc, but this also kind of hints at the idea that there's some kind of like connection between these 2 characters. Like maybe they knew each other as children, because it looks like that Vanica might be around the same age as Lord Patika, and if the 2 of them were it might be the fact that the 2 of them might have been, childhood friends or something like that. I'm not sure, but this scene obviously indicates that there's some kind of connection between the 2 of them. They know of each other, or at least Vanica knows of Lord Patika. So there has to be some sort of connection between them. That's the reason why she wants to kill her herself instead of letting the curse kill her. And then after we're done checking in with Vanica, we end up checking in with Dante, and we see him at this like force field or this crystallized wall. I can't really tell which it is based off the drawing. But anyway, when we get this scene, basically what it comes down to is him saying that Yami is going to be his next target. And this actually makes a lot of sense for 2 reasons. One, as he says in the chapter, Yami is obviously an arcane stage mage, and obviously they're collecting arcane stage mages for a reason. We don't know exactly what their purpose for them is just yet, but we know they're collecting them. But the other reason why this makes actually a lot of sense is because of the fact that besides Asta, Yami would be the biggest threat against Megikulo that the Clover Kingdom has. Because as we saw in the last arc, Yami's rare dark magic is actually very effective against demons. So with Yami being a threat against Megikulo, it would make a lot of sense that they would target him as someone to take out. Now, obviously, like I said, we don't know exactly what their plans are for arcane stage mages, but we do know that it is a strategic move for them to take out Yami, which would greatly basically diminish the power that the Clover Kingdom and the Heart Kingdom have against the Dark Triad and Megikulo. And you know what, speaking of power, I kind of want to talk about real quick something that happened in the last week's chapter. There's a scene where when Zeno realizes that Yuno, Letterly, and Klaus defeated the 2 Dark Apostles, that he mentions that he should have brought with him people who can use up to 50% of the demon's power instead. Which, that line of dialogue alone completely destroys my idea that the Dark Apostles were possibly like the higher tier members of the Dark Triad's army. Because if there are people who can release up to 50% of the power when they could only do 40%, that means that these Dark Apostles that I thought were the, upper echelon of the army probably aren't even that much above the regular foot soldiers that we saw Asta and the rest of the people who trained in the Heart Kingdom for the time skip defeat in the beginning of this arc. Which means that if there are people that can release up to 50% of the power, possibly even people who can go up to 60% of the power, besides the Dark Triad, that means the Dark Triad and the Space Kingdom's army just became that much more of a threat. And when you think about that, you have to really question what chance does the Heart Kingdom and the Clover Kingdom's, combined alliance really stand against them when their strongest squad couldn't handle people who are only able to use up to 40% of the power. And this is when you actually have to sit down and think about exactly who the Heart Kingdom and the Clover Kingdom actually have on their side, and do their combined efforts actually stand a chance of defeating this threat from the Space Kingdom. And when you think about it, alright, the Heart Kingdom and the Clover Kingdom, they have Asta, and they have everyone else who trained in the Heart Kingdom for the half-year time. They have the Spirit Guardians from the Heart Kingdom, who are the elite members of the Heart Kingdom, and possibly any other foot soldier that the Heart Kingdom has. And then the Clover Kingdom obviously has, their other squads and their squad captains. But if you think about the fact that the strongest squad in the Clover Kingdom was so easily defeated by just one member of the Dark Triad, and people who were only able to use 40% of the demon's power, does that mean that the other squads don't really even stand even close of a chance of defeating the Dark Triad and the other Dark Apostles or other members of the Dark Triad's army? I mean, honestly, just because the Golden Dawn was the strongest squad doesn't mean they had the strongest members. As we already know, Mariel Yuno, a lot of us would actually say was possibly the strongest person in the Clover Kingdom behind Julius. And now that Julius is back in the body of a 13-year-old, she possibly now the strongest person in the Clover Kingdom. Maybe arguing Fugoyan now that he has Salamander as well. But still, those two are obviously possibly a lot stronger than what William was when he was fighting off against Zeno. And then you got characters like Dorothy, who, if she can get someone inside her dream dimension, is pretty much unbeatable. and all the other characters and all the other captains who are pretty strong in themselves. But does this power that the Heart Kingdom and the Core Kingdom have together really stand a chance against the Diamond or the Space Kingdom? And if I'm being honest, alone, I don't think they stand that great of a chance of winning. And that's why I think that in this arc, we actually have to see the characters who I called for them showing up in the last arc to help out the Clover Kingdom against the elves and the demon. They really need to show up in this arc. And that being the Witch Queen and all the witches from her forest. You know, the members of the Diamond Kingdom who are still alive, who were somewhat on good terms with Asta. Pretty much every character who I called for them showing up in the previous arc, they will actually have to show up, in my opinion, and help out in this fight against the Space Kingdom. And you know what? It would actually make a lot more sense for these characters that I mentioned to actually show up in this arc than it would have for them to show up in the last arc. Because the last arc, when they were fighting off against the elves and fighting off against that demon, that took place over the span of one day. Realistically, that's not enough time for all these people who aren't in the Clover Kingdom to hear about what's going on and actually travel to the Clover Kingdom and help out. But this is a war between the Clover Kingdom and the Heart Kingdom and the Space Kingdom because of the fact that the Diamond Kingdom's already been conquered. And the fact that this is actually going to be something that takes place over multiple days, not just one. There's plenty of time for the Witch Queen to hear about what's going on in the Clover Kingdom and decide to lend a hand, because of the fact that if the Clover Kingdom falls, then the Space Kingdom becomes a threat against her as well. And this, there's plenty of time for the Diamond Kingdom survivors like Mars to show up in the Clover Kingdom and say, hey, my kingdom was taken over. I'm here to help out save your kingdom. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for the chapter. I'm excited to see what comes of this whole fight between Dante and Yami. Even though I'm sure Dante's going to end up winning that fight, it's still going to be something exciting to see. And I'm actually really looking forward to seeing exactly what's going on with the other members of the Black Bulls. Because we know a few of them did go to train in the Heart Kingdom, but I'm interested in seeing what happened with the ones that didn't. Now, when it comes to Gordon, we pretty much already know that Gordon, it was already pretty much foreshadowed that he's going to go back to his family, and they're going to train him to use his curse magic in new different ways. So I'm excited to see exactly what came of that. And I'm excited to see, if maybe Gray, Gouch, if any of the other members of the Black Bulls did any training themselves during this half year, and if they've gotten any stronger. Especially when it comes to Vanessa. I want to see if she found new ways to use Rogue and his fate-changing magic in different ways and had better control of it. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. I'm excited, like I said, to see what's going to become of that. That's it for the chapter. That's it for the review. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. Comment down below your thoughts and theories, and I'll catch you guys next week. Peace.